As a facilitator, you have a wealth of opportunities to enhance your course within the framework of the learning competencies. Each course should be modified to suit the needs and interests of your particular community of learners. You may need to add lectures or discussion questions or assignments to the discussion area. The course itself does not recognize when learners experience gaps in understanding or confusion. Without you, the course cannot reinforce the key points. It cannot generate discussion, provide summaries and reviews, synthesize and provide constant and individualized feedback. These are all elements of the course that bring it to life. As you've learned, some students require alternative explanations to fully understand the subject. Learners will have varying opinions about what information is relevant and practical. Some students may need more of a challenge, while others need a better understanding of the content. An effective facilitator is attentive to clues when intervention would enhance learning. Consider the following ways you might modify the course. Revise or add an assignment that links to discussion themes. Provide exercises to ensure that confusion has been resolved. Suggest alternate readings. Recommend web links that will add a visual or audio dimension to the content. Recommend hands-on resources that learners might find locally, such as magazines, audio and videotapes, CDs, DVDs, libraries, museums, exhibits, and theaters. Invite guest speakers to address themes that are emerging in the dialogue. Invite students from previous courses to comment on moments of eureka. Share ideas with other facilitators. These are just a few ideas. The more creative you can be, the more likely you and the learners in your course will stay engaged, have fun, and be richly rewarded. One of the most important elements of facilitating group discussion is asking a good question. The ability to ask the right question at the right time can make the difference between whether or not a particular learning outcome is achieved. Using Bloom's taxonomy as a foundation, you can stimulate different kinds of learning to achieve different learning outcomes. What about listening? How does a facilitator or student know which question to ask? Careful listening will guide one in determining which question will elicit the brightest response or leverage new levels of understanding. Listen for the following: how a comment relates to the discussion as a whole or to other comments. Opportunities to move the discussion forward. What is being left unsaid? The authority or doubt with which the comment is communicated. Questions that are left unanswered. Now let's talk about focusing the discussion. Once learners begin to fully participate in discussions, how will you keep the discussion focused? To keep the discussion on topic, you need to be an active daily participant in the online environment. Sometimes students will become so involved, confused, or frustrated that they will clear new paths that are parallel or perpendicular to the intended learning direction. When this happens, you may need to change the direction of the discussion to bring the students back to the original topic. The following case study provides a good example of how to refocus discussion and capitalize on student contributions at the same time. So this case study involves an instructor who we'll call Gary. He was facilitating a marketing course that was discussing how sport utility vehicles, SUVs, were being targeted to women buyers. Many of the students were from the Detroit area and worked for the auto industry. The discussion was going well. One morning, Gary took a customary break, and when he checked in the following evening, he discovered that the discussion was way off topic. One woman said she liked the Chevy Tahoe because it had higher ground clearance than the Ford Explorer, and since she lived way out in the country, she needed the extra ground clearance. Another woman remarked that she liked the Jeep Cherokee because of the straight axle that provided the extra strength she needed to tow her large boat. Another student did not like any of these models because none of them came in her preferred color. There were approximately 50 new notes posted of this type. Gary responded by posting this comment to the discussion. So if you were marketing SUVs, how would you address the preferences expressed in the class in your marketing campaign? He was able to take the student interest and weave them back into a discussion on the marketing issues. Part of managing the discussion is a question: how often does the facilitator need to respond? Many online facilitator agreements require facilitators to check in daily for the duration of the class. This is typically expected in the interactive online environment. Faculty need to decide when to go online and for how long. Some find that it's easier and more productive to check in on the discussion at least twice a day. This may range from 15 minutes to monitor students' participation to 2 hours to actively engage in the learning process. Other facilitators prefer to go online once a day. There are a few trade-offs. If you go log on to the system a few times each day, there are fewer notes each time and it's easier to stay current. If you log on once a day, there are more notes and it takes more time. However, some facilitators find that it's easier to maintain their train of thought by reviewing all the responses at one time. Each facilitator finds their own rhythm. Online students do the same thing. The important factor is to be present. Whatever the requirements of your campus or course, there will be a steady stream of notes posted to the discussion threads. Many factors contribute to these differences, such as the number of students, chemistry, experience, personalities, motivation, the complexity of the material being covered, the degree of foundation required to generate meaningful discussion, the hospitality of the learning environment. There are many reasons a group of learners has more or less dialogue. These variations are okay. Part of the facilitator's role is to monitor the quality versus the quantity of responses. Let's talk about posting multiple questions. A facilitator has the ability to modify some of the questions to ensure that the discussion involves the individual needs and interests of the learners. The advantage of asking all learners to respond to the same set of questions is typically a more in-depth level of discussion. The discussion tends to focus on the more interesting or exemplary themes. Assigning individuals specific questions is also an option. Posing questions to the group versus individuals will sometimes be based on how much time the facilitator has to provide feedback to the learners. As for participation, in a previous lecture we talked about preparing your students so that they will know in advance what constitutes meaningful participation in discussions. This lecture gives you more information on what constitutes effective participation in online discussions. Participation in the online learning environment can be defined as meaningful contributions that advance the successful achievement of a given learning competency, comments that help to focus the conversation, contributions that demonstrate one's ability to test and/or apply theory, concepts, and skills, engaging in discussion between other students and/or the facilitator that promotes the advancement of the overall knowledge of the class relative to the subject matter, submitting specified assignments on time, and lastly, demonstrating critical thinking skills. So what are the elements of a good response? One way that you can manage a discussion is to be proactive before discussions even begin. You need to let your students know what is acceptable and unacceptable in class discussions, whether they be in class or online. Especially when discussion is required, students may try to get participation points by simply agreeing with what others have said. Even if a student writes an entire paragraph in a discussion thread, it may amount to nothing more than a "me too" response. These types of responses should be discouraged. The best way to ensure meaningful participation by learners is to tell them explicitly what is expected in their responses. Consider the following criteria for good response. Take a position and persuade your peers to include relevant points from the lectures, text, and other readings. Cite your references, include website addresses. Include relevant personal experience within the content, if possible. Organize your responses logically by including a clear stated central thesis, main ideas, relevant facts, and examples. If you discover conflicting points of view in the readings or between the readings and the lectures, describe the various points of view and cite their source. When responding to classmates, try to add clarity to what's already been presented by adding your own experience and/or knowledge. Reply to the responses you agree with by adding support or clarifying the point of view. Reply to those responses that you disagree with by presenting counter arguments. Always communicate respectfully. Remember that the goal of the discussion is to achieve specific learning outcomes. Try to be both subjective and objective in your point of view. It will help you clarify your position so you can make discussions more stimulating. Let's talk about casual conversation. Experienced online learners can be very talkative. While it's important for facilitators to enjoy and support learners as they share the problems of everyday life, too much sidebar conversation can be very frustrating. Facilitators should always include a student lounge for informal dialogue, explain why the lounge exists, and direct informal student dialogue to that area. So what do you do for non-participants? Students new to the online learning environment may be hesitant or reluctant to interact at first. One way a facilitator can encourage participation is to contact students individually through their personal mailboxes. Such contact can build trust by convincing the students that the facilitator cares about them as individuals and about their personal success. How to deal with offensive comments. The tone of comments is very important in the absence of other cases such as facial expressions, voice, and other kinds of body language. Comments can easily be misinterpreted if attention isn't paid to communicating in a friendly, supportive, open-minded, respectful tone. Facilitators may encounter rude, abusive, and even threatening comments in discussions. Facilitators have the option of removing students from a discussion if they are unable to speak respectively to one another. But a facilitator's first action should always be to call the student immediately and discuss the impact of those comments on the dialogue and the learning environment. Persuasive negativity can shut down the learning process, and it's very important that the facilitator protects learners and the learning environment. Please read the case study, Managing Discussion, Can a Dot Be Considered Art?, by clicking on the next item in the navigation pane. It underscores the importance of being an active participant in the class discussion. It also illustrates the need to be flexible, intuitive when intervening. Imagine this scenario if the facilitator only checked in once a week. To keep discussions on track and support the attainment of the learning outcomes, facilitators must be active participants in the process. If a student does send a message that seems to be hot-tempered, facilitators and learners should take the opportunity to model a good response to unfair or hurtful remarks. The facilitator should also write a personal note to let the student know that the facilitator has a sincere desire to help. There may be times when the facilitator will just want to let a comment pass. Other times you will find that students will take the initiative to reinforce the discussion in constructive ways, as illustrated in the case study.